How would you feel about any person you're not allowed to criticize? Would that make you like the person more? No. Where do conspiracy theories come from? Where do you think they come from? They come from living in a country where the government will never explain anything and lies constantly. Censorship has one goal, and that's to preserve secrecy. And secrecy has one purpose, and that's to abet wrongdoing.
Tucker Carlson just slammed the U.S. government for embracing censorship, and even under an administration that in many ways secured its victory in the last election by objecting to calls by Democrats to police against disinformation. And in this clip, he lays out the reality of a potential plan that will end free speech as we know it, and why Americans have to object to this and reject it at all costs. So let's get into this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
So people who are doing nothing wrong are transparent. People who are committing evil hide, and censorship allows them to hide. It's literally that simple, and those people are the most powerful people in the country. So who's encouraging this? The donors, whoever they are, but there are lots of lobby groups, all of them on the left, pushing the Republican-led Congress to get behind censorship initiatives using the cover of the Section 230 debate to get it done, to pressure the tech companies into making you shut up, into taking your opinions off the internet, using algorithms designed to censor you without even a human being entering into the equation. No person will decide that your opinion is offensive and pull it off. The computer will decide that, and it will be aided by the massive exponential growth in computing power that is at the very center of tech right now, AI. That is the goal, to make certain that opinions that are disruptive to the people in charge never see the light of day. What's amazing, and what's especially infuriating, is that many in the Republican Party, the party that controls all branches of government right now, are completely for this, strongly for it. Where did they get this idea? Is this a betrayal? Oh, it's a betrayal. How profound a betrayal? Listen to Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska, a former Air Force general, describe who he's been talking to about censorship.
And I appreciate Jonathan Greenblatt, what HINM and his ADL stands for. I know you've made us better with your feedback and ideas and recommendations, and it's been a treat to get to know you. We want to be in a country that makes clear that anti-Semitism or any kind of racism is repugnant, unacceptable, not allowed in my space, and with a zero tolerance for it. So we need to hold these companies accountable and work with them to take it up the airwave.
All right, so I want to just counter something Tucker said. I completely agree with him, except for one thing he said earlier, and then we'll break down Bacon's comments here, is that Tucker said that all the lobbying groups kind of pushing for censorship are on the left, and I just really disagree with that. I'll just show you here, we do have AIPAC's website talking about opposing anti-Israeli discrimination. And yeah, you can say AIPAC's bipartisan in a way. It's not explicitly left. It's kind of just welcoming all the pro-Zionist voices. And AIPAC is pushing to change the codes of states and hate speech codes to accommodate the idea that criticism toward Israel is anti-Semitism by default. They push this out via their briefs, and they talk about this on their website. So you can say that this is all on the left, but it seems like some pretty big organizations that cater a lot to the Zionist right are pushing this too. That's my only reservation with what Tucker said. I completely agree with him on the importance of free speech and opposing all calls for censorship, regardless of which party is in power.
It's hard to believe that's a real clip. We actually checked. Is that real? Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska, a great and sensible state with tons of normal people, a former Air Force general. Is he really colluding with Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL to take away your right to say what you think? Oh, you bet. That's exactly what he's doing. And make no mistake, the ADL is not an anti-defamation organization. The ADL practices defamation and slander and bullying, and not in service of protecting a marginalized group, but in accruing power and by forwarding its goals, which are ideological. And if you don't believe that, go on the ADL's website and take a look at what the ADL considers hate speech. Hate speech, another one of those terms never quite defined. But the ADL has actually taken the time to define it. What do they consider hate speech? Well, among other things, complaining about drag queen story hour is hate speech, according to the ADL. Not being enthusiastic about the COVID vax, that's hate speech, and it's dangerous. Noticing that the American population has changed completely in the past 30 years thanks to immigration, that's dangerous hate speech. You should be punished for that, for noticing it in your country that you were born in.
Yeah, you can see why the term anti-Semitism itself is kind of being destroyed. It's losing value as more and more people are waking up to the fact that that's just what people want to say when they want to get out of actually arguing things based on reason and based on the substance of an argument. It's going the same way of the accusations that everyone was a racist that I don't like, right? Well, that term racism has lost value because people saw that for what it is. It's become a meme. I think anti-Semitism is coming to that point too, especially when you have major figures on the right like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens speaking the truth about Israel's atrocities and the Israel First mantra and Israel's influence in the U.S. government, regardless of how you feel about U.S. foreign policy. The fact that so many people are waking up to this now, they're seeing it for what it is. So to, just innately jump on the hitch of, hey, it's anti-Semitism if you criticize Israel like the Anti-Defamation League does, it's destroying that terminology. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing in a way because it's going to make people realize that they just can't keep getting away with this. Some people are still scared that that's the case, that their reputation will be harmed irreparably if that's said about them. But it's losing more and more power over time. And in a way, it skirts around the fact and kind of downplays real anti-Semitism, which does exist too. But, you can be anti-Semitic and be expressing your opinion in America. You can get slammed for that too. That's also part of free speech.
No noticing. You can't notice that it looks completely different because of decisions that someone who never consulted you made without your knowledge. Shut up, says the ADL. You not only don't have the right to speak, we're going to scream at you and call you a Nazi and imply that you are the dangerous one, the people who opened up the borders to 50 million foreigners. But you're the dangerous one. Sure. You know what else is hate speech, by the way? Reading the Gospels of Matthew or Mark or Luke or John. The gospel itself, Christianity itself, is hate speech. I know that because 3 nights ago, I recounted the Christian story in its essence over like 5 minutes and was immediately denounced by the ADL as someone who was dangerous and inspiring murder.
Yeah, basically anything can be hate speech. It's in the eye of the beholder. Personally, I think it's hate speech when Smotrich and Netanyahu are talking about how, there's no reason to object to my policy in Gaza and talking about starvation being palatable if it were up to us, but because there's so much media attention on the starvation in Gaza, we can't do it, even though that's what they're doing. Or talking about how they want to just, cleanse the Palestinians of their land. They want to completely overtake Palestine, Gaza. I think that's hate speech. And guess what? When my president jumps in line and just endorses it wholesale and uses no U.S. leverage to prevent it, I think that's hate speech too. But, hate speech is free speech. We can oppose it. I argue against it using my own speech. I don't think it should be outlawed to have controversial opinions whatsoever. That's un-American if you believe that legislation should be otherwise.
But I'm not the only one. The ADL has actively attacked the Christian gospel for years, has gotten behind a definition of hate speech that includes the Christian story. That's not an exaggeration. That's not a fervid conspiracy theory. That's a fact, and you can look it up. So this is the guy? That's the guy, Jonathan Greenblatt, of the most aggressively left-wing, Democratic-aligned, but much more important than that, lunatic, anti-human, anti-American group, the ADL, completely corrupt. He's consulting that guy to decide how much speech you should have because there are ugly opinions on the internet? Yeah. That's your Republican Party. Was he denounced by his fellow Republicans in the House? Was he denounced by the Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson? No, he wasn't. They barely even noticed because they have the same views. Not all of them, but an awful lot of them.
Yeah, this is the censorship mentality. It's just a different flavor of it. When you align with the pro-Israeli interests and the Anti-Defamation League and AIPAC about what they want in terms of speech curtailments, you're just embracing that same mentality, but just a different flavor of it. It's the red Kool-Aid instead of the blue. That's all this is. And they'll never face punishment or ostracization for it because it involves the consolidation of more power, which both Democrats and Republicans like. Same with Pam Bondi when she says, hey, there's this separate category of speech called hate speech, and guess what? We're going to prosecute crimes based on hate speech. This is what prominent Democratic politicians said in the end of 2024. During that election cycle, at the very tail end, you had people like Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris all say this in various different ways. AOC did this too. And they got mocked and ridiculed. It was a meme that Biden was trying to start a disinformation ministry, remember? Well, the Republicans that are aligned with these interests and lobbying groups want to revive it too. There's nothing new under the sun.
It's unbelievable, and it's counterproductive. Because once again, censorship is never enacted to help the powerless. It is always and everywhere an effort to shield the powerful, always. And in fact, it has a counterproductive effect on the people it is supposedly designed to help. How would you feel about any person you're not allowed to criticize? Would that make you like the person more? No.
That's how you learn who rules over you, by the way. The people you aren't allowed to criticize, those are your rulers. Knowing nothing else about any dynamics or power structures, if you can't criticize an individual or an organization, they rule over you. That's the way to tell.
It would make you resentful and suspicious, and it would give you the well-deserved opinion that this is not an egalitarian society in which we're all citizens. It's a hierarchical society in which the government has decided some people have more rights than others. So if you find out you're not allowed to criticize someone else, maybe the first question you might ask is, well, then why are people allowed to criticize me?
Yeah, the government always has more rights, including a monopoly on force, the ability to kill people with impunity, especially overseas. About 5 million deaths in the war on terror. If you or I murdered someone, we're going to go behind bars, especially if it's premeditated murder. We're done for life. And they can go beyond murdering people. They can steal from people. If I stole $500 from my neighbor, I'd be charged with a crime. They have a mass extortion apparatus, not only in the form of the IRS, but also in the form of the central bank that prints more currency. And by way of doing that, devalues the remaining currency. It is a tax. It is extortion. And all sorts of other things. Surveillance, involves what would be trespassing if it were me. This is the fruits of government, and vile, nefarious, out of control, immoral, and illegitimate government especially.
And the answer is because some people have more power in our society, or are being used to pit different groups against each other, or who knows what's going on. But none of it is consistent with the core promise of this country, which is we're all citizens under our government, and we're all equal before our God who made us. It says that. But increasingly, that's not the country we live in. We live in a country where some people have more rights than others. And that's exactly the kind of message you would send if you wanted to foment a revolution against your government, because it enrages people and it divides them from each other. Oh, we have to protect this group. What does everyone else think of that? They secretly don't like the group. You're not ending bigotry by enacting censorship. You're creating it, Dumbo.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. If you think that some of these campaigns and attempts to reduce anti-Semitism or, bigotry is going to do that, it's just the opposite. If you want to, compound and exacerbate bigotry and anti-Semitism, here's what you do. You adhere to an Israel first mentality. You say whatever they do, they can get away with. We're not going to use any U.S. leverage to stop it. And beyond that, we're going to encourage it. We're going to keep giving them more money, get involved in more conflicts in the Middle East that they want the U.S. to be involved in. That's how you increase bigotry, and that's how you increase anti-Semitism. And what do the last few years show? I think it shows exactly that.
And this is specifically aimed at Congressman Bacon, who was somehow an Air Force general. He can't be dumb, but he's obviously not very thoughtful, because this is very obvious. People don't like other people who get special treatment. Were you never a child? You never learned that? Who knows what the purpose here? It doesn't even matter. It is happening right before us. The people who are elected to protect us, who say they're our friends, are selling us out. And you can theorize as to why. And by the way, all of that theorizing is itself unhealthy. Where do conspiracy theories come from? Where do you think they come from? They come from living in a country where the government will never explain anything and lies constantly. So the next time you see someone in power complain about malicious conspiracy theories, stop him in mid-sentence and say they exist because of you. If you would just tell the truth, if you would live like Charlie Kirk and answer the question politely, reasonably, fully, there wouldn't be a vacuum into which lunatics would rush.
This is so true. This is the reason for conspiracy theories. And that said is kind of like to throw shade at someone, usually to make them seem like, hey, what they have to say isn't of value. But the truth is that we know from the lessons of history that people conspire to do nefarious things. During, FDR's administration, he threw people of Japanese ancestry in internment camps. It took a conspiracy to make that happen. He did that under executive authority. It was challenged in court, and then in Korematsu versus the United States, it was said, hey, he can do that, by the way. Just unimaginably evil. During the COVID regime, we were told, all of this propaganda and everything we had to adhere to, and all these stupid guidelines about masks and 6-foot rules and all this nonsense with the vaccines being sold despite Big Pharma having immunity from any damages. And you were a kook, right? You were a conspiracy theory if you objected to that. Well, guess what? That was elites conspiring to do that to us, to make religious worship restrictions part of that, to curtail our assembly rights, shut down businesses, destroy people's lives, make old people die alone. That is the fruits of why people believe in conspiracy theories, because the elites do conspire against us.
We would have a plausible answer to basic questions like, what the hell is going on? But because you haven't provided that, what do you think's going to happen? People are going to have some pretty far out explanations. And maybe some of them are true, by the way. We don't know. Your behavior is so suspicious because you can't answer any question straight. Any. And you're spending your time talking to Jonathan Greenblatt, one of the darkest, most corrupt people in our society, truly a divisive figure. Speaking of divisive, how many Americans have made fellow Americans hate each other more consistently over the years than Jonathan Greenblatt? Very, very few. Very few. And you're talking to him? So if this sounds like a paranoid rant, like, oh, that could never happen, well, you should know that it is happening right now in the state of California. The state of California, like 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, 8 days ago, something like that, has passed a law in the state legislature, both chambers of the state legislature. It awaits a signature from Gavin Newsom that would ban hate speech on the internet in California. Hate speech. Now, how do they define hate speech? I actually have the definition. I actually wrote it down because I was so shocked by it that this is happening. The state of California, if Gavin Newsom signs this law, and he has until October 13th to do it, people will be fined if the censors determine that speech constitutes, and we're quoting now, violence, intimidation, or coercion. What's intimidation or coercion, right? Right. Or coercion based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, or other protected characteristics. Obviously, white Christian men are not covered under that. And so the society becomes ever more hierarchical with a Brahmin class and untouchables at the bottom, the opposite of the country all of us over 50 grew up in, that had an egalitarian spirit where some were rich, some were poor, some were smart, some were dumb, some had good jobs, others were unemployed, but all of us were considered equal under the law and equal in the eyes of God.
Yeah, and guess what? Guess who gets to be the arbiter of what constitutes hate speech with all the arbitrary power that comes with that under any of these legislative plans? It's the government. And guess which entity would be much more likely to prosecute crimes, hate speech crimes, against people that happen to, be critical of the government? The government gets that power, right? When you use this language, and he mentioned it, coercive, how are you going to determine that, whether speech is coercive or not? This just puts way too much power in the hands of the government to be able to police things that should be allowed in an open society. First Amendment or not. You can say whatever you want about the First Amendment, but our rights are as a result of nature and not words on parchment that far preceded the First Amendment. The ability to speak freely is so important to a free society in general, because how can we make informed decisions if we're not even privy to what people think about society and their surroundings and political dynamics, domestic policy, foreign policy, etc.?
And that concept is the basis of a stable society, any stable society, and it was the basis of stability in this country. And laws like this and the attitudes that give birth to them, to laws like this, have made it wildly unstable. Wobbly, it's so unstable. So as of October 13th, that could become law. Now, that's a censorship law. Now, they'll say, no, we're actually getting the platforms to censor. Well, right, you're getting someone else to do the job for you, but if you hire a hitman and he carries out the hit, you're the murderer. He participated in it, but you hired him. And that's exactly what's going on here. The state of California, under Gavin Newsom, is about to, we think, censor the opinions of Americans, not to protect anybody, but to shield themselves from criticism so they can continue to do what they want to do in secret.
Yeah, that's going to be their excuse every single time. Well, hey, we're not censoring you. It's not the government doing this. The government's not the bad guy. We would never do that. Why would we censor you? We're just going to use a proxy to do it, using the coercive power of government to make it happen. That's what they're saying. And that's no different, by the way, than when they said, hey, you have to take this experimental vaccine, which wasn't even a vaccine. It was an mRNA treatment. And if you don't do that, you're going to be penalized. You're going to lose your most basic rights under that Biden executive order that thankfully didn't hold up in court. This is what they argued. And guess what? That was using, by proxy, organizations that aligned with the government to do it. It was the same thing that we know when the liberal establishment pled with big tech to censor users. That's what the Twitter files showed, where they just used these appendages, these private organizations, with the coercive power of government in tandem to push down these policies. So those arms become appendages of the state to do the state's bidding. It's just a strategy they use to get away, with the idea that, hey, it's not the government doing it, but it is the government doing it. The government is half of the equation when you combine corporate and state power to impose a censorship regime. And that's what we're seeing in many cases. We saw it with the big tech and Twitter file revelations, where you had basically every 3-letter agency under the sun having secret channels with the government to align on who should be banned and what should be talked about. And that the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was not fake news, supposedly there's not even supposedly, there was a mass effort to wipe out that story on the eve of the 2000 election. That's what we get from this private and corporate collaboration that violates the First Amendment, and beyond the First Amendment, violates our intrinsic right to speak freely. Censorship is basically the worst and most vile form of evil, in some ways even more vile and evil than murder, I think. And man, that's saying something. Both are vile and evil, but the bedrocks of a free society are on the bedrock of free speech. And you can try to play with words and market this in any direction that you want to say that, it is conducive to free speech to police disinformation because people get the wrong impression. Let them make that decision for them. Don't allow the government to be the arbiter of that, because when the government has all that power, dissidents are just going to be crushed. Critics are going to be crushed, and you're going to usher in full totalitarianism on the American populace in the form of censorship. But I do want to hear from what you guys have to say. Let me know down below. Is Tucker Carlson right about censorship? The methods that, the feds and states are using to try to push this down? And is it all on the left? Is it, Republicans collaborating with this just for like kind of guiding it in a slightly different direction? Just let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Tucker. Great segment here. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel. I'll tip my hat to you in appreciation if you do that. And in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.